First section. I have some shilos that I got. I have it towards the end, but what I want to do is just run through some of the halachos that I've been covering recently, related to Havdala. Some things that people know, some things maybe people are not as familiar. Some of the things we've covered in the past, I'm not really sure. I just want to run through, I think 9 shilos that I have that are negeya, and we'll happy to take shilos, and I'm happy to mention the shilos that I got this week. So I want to just run through from the beginning. There's a minig brought down by the Ramah, I think we spoke about this once, and that is that you put wine on the eyes, and after Havdala is done. And the question is, what's the Indian? Why do we do this? The Ramah brings it down that after Havdala is done, it's roichtzin bayis einayim. You wash the eyes, and you put, you literally. I saw Ashkenazi that he dips his fingers in, and he literally puts it on his eyes like it's a wash. And the Ramah says it's mishum chiv of mitzvah, that we want to show how cherished the mitzvah is, that we're literally washing our face with it. The Lubavitcher Rebbe added in Igris that it's also a skula if you have eye problems to put it on your eyes. It's a good thing. It's a skula to know. Agav, the Ketzois HaShulchan, he writes that he quotes the Siddur Yavitz that there was a minig, I've seen Mekubalim do this, that they smell the candle, also to show chiv of mitzvah, to show how like we're trying to get all involved and all invested in the mitzvahs, you smell it. That's the first thing I just wanted to mention. It's a good question of why don't we do this by Kiddush. It could be that there's a reason to show chiv of mitzvah to overcompensate, because right now Shabbos is ending, and there's a sadness that Shabbos comes to an end, and we want to show that you don't kill the messenger about Havdala, you mechavev the mitzvah, even though it's more of a sad mitzvah, because it means that the Kedusha Shabbos is leaving us, but still to show chiv of mitzvah is a good question. There's a famous concept that women do not drink the wine of Havdala. They do not drink the Havdala wine. And I'm not going to go through it. They grow a beard. They're not going to grow a beard, but it's a shiur. But why is it that women don't drink the Havdala wine? So the classic reason is from the Shlah HaKadosh. The Shlah HaKadosh says, because there's the Shita of the Zohar. The Zohar says that what was the Eitz Hadas? Eitz Hadas was a grape that she squeezed and turned into wine. And therefore, and who was the main protagonist in the Avera was Chava. Chava not only did the Avera, she got Adam to sin. So the whole Inyan, and if not for the sin, we'd enter Shabbos and it would be Yom Shekule Shabbos. There would be Shabbos forever. The whole reason why Shabbos ends, and there's an Inyan of a weekday, is because of the sin. And therefore, as like a punishment, that because the reason why there's Havdalah is because of her, and it's through wine, you don't get to drink the wine. It's like a penalty, you don't get to drink the wine. It's always interesting to me, because if I would tell you the opposite, if I would tell you they dafka should drink the wine to bring a tikkun, you'd be like, that makes sense. But now we're saying the opposite, they shouldn't drink the wine. But that's the reason why, there's an Indian for women to make challah on Fridays. Why is it such a big mitzvah for women to make challah on Fridays dafka? It's obviously for Shabbos, but it's a big mitzvah. If a woman's able to separate challah and not just buy challah in the store, it's a big, big mitzvah. It's not so easy because you have to bake a lot, but if a woman's able to make the Mekayim the mitzvah, 3 pounds is without a bracha, but at least Mekayim the mitzvah with 3 pounds. So what's the Indian? Why is it that we're so makbid on Fridays that women do challah? It's because Adam Arishan was the challah of creation, right? The Magen Avraham says, because challah is the first piece that you give to the kohen, you give to God, so to speak. So Adam was the first challah of creation, and because of her sin, it got ruined on a Friday. So therefore, on a Friday, she makes challah again to fix it. So there, she's doing it to fix it. Over here, we're telling her to go away. But B'kitzur, that's the Indian of why women don't drink the Havdalah wine. There is a side reason, which is more halachic, that there's an opinion that holds that women are not obligated in Havdalah. If they're not obligated in Havdalah, then potentially the besamim and the eish is all a hefsek. But it's not for now. But B'kitzur, that's the classic reason. But I will say this, we'll get to it in a few moments. If, let's say, a woman has to make Havdalah herself, which, by the way, if the man has already made Havdalah himself and she's capable of making Havdalah, she should make Havdalah herself. It's become not common in people's minds. Like if you go home and let's say you already heard Havdalah. Now you probably should wait for your wife. Let's say you didn't wait. If you heard Havdalah, you wouldn't think of it. If you heard Havdalah, you go to the mitzvah. You get home. As we'll see, if your wife is capable of reading and saying it on her own, she should make Havdalah, not you. Most women just don't want to, but the truth is, if she's capable, she should. So, in such a situation, she avada has to drink the wine. This whole Indian of not drinking the wine, it's a very nice custom, But Avada, if she's making Havdala, it's a bracha levatala if she doesn't drink. So of course she drinks in that situation. It's not a shayla. But it means that if she's not making Havdala, the maid's making Havdala, there's no Indian for her to drink a little bit of the wine. Although normally there's a concept of everyone drinks the kaishal bracha, not by Havdala. Havdala, only the person that made the Havdala, and women do not partake. One of the major differences, I'm going to keep going, and again, if there's any questions, happy to take it. One of the major differences by Havdala of how it's said is between sefardim and Ashkenazim. It's an interesting shayla. The Rishonim were asked, how should Havdala be said? Should Havdala be said standing or sitting? Tosfos writes that it's better to say it's sitting. Why? Because the whole dafka, by the way, dafka when you're being mitzi your people. If you're saying it yourself, you should stand. But if you sit it, if you're saying it for multiple people, you're saying it for your family. Tosfos says it's better to say it's sitting. Why? Because if I'm being mitzi you, we have to be one unit, kavua. They have to be set. You know, if I'm making, kiddush, or I'm making Havdala, and you're walking over there and you're over there, we're not a unit. We got to come, sit down. So Tosfos says it's better for everybody to be sitting together for Havdala. If you're being mitzi, everyone should sit. That's Tosfos. Comes the kolbai, another Rishon. He says no, you should stand. Why? The whole Indian of Havdala is escorting the Shabbos queen out. You don't sit when you escort someone. You walk them out. So it should be done standing. That's the kolbai. So how do we paskin? Again, if you're saying Kiddush for Havdala for others, the Sefardim sit. The Ashkenazim stand. That's one of the major differences in Sefardim and Ashkenazim. And obviously, if you're with Sefardim, sit. And if the Sefardim with you, you should probably stand. But that's the difference. Now, by the way, even amongst Ashkenazim, this is something people are not careful with. Even though we stand for Havdala, you should sit for the drinking. Why? Because the Shulchan Aruch Harav says a Talmid Chacham does not drink standing up. A Talmid Chacham does not drink standing up. You sit like a mensch, and therefore, even for Havdala, a lot of times people they're not like they're over the sink. You say Havdala, and then you sit for the actual drinking. L'kuli amal holidays. Okay.
What's the meaning of
okay. One other halacha. Let's keep going. So the Shulchan Aruch says the following: when it comes to the Havdala, this is what the Shulchan Aruch says. Oiches hayayin biyamin, you hold the wine in your right hand, because whenever you're making a bracha, you always show chashivas to the right hand. So whenever you're making a bracha on a potato, you hold the potato in your right hand. So when you're making the Havdala, you begin with the wine in your right hand. Then says the Mechaber, hahadas besmol, the hadas, which is the besamim, in your left hand. They picked hadasim because there was an old minig by Sefardim, by everyone, by Sefardim actually, that they would take the hadas of the Daled Minim from Sukkos and they would use it throughout the year for besamim. Okay. We don't do it anymore because our hadasim are so dry they won't give off any smell. But bekitzer, so you hold the wine in your right hand and the besamim in your left hand. Then you make the bracha on the wine, and now you're up to the besamim. So you know what the Mechaber says? Noitel hadas biyamin v'yayin b'smol. Switch hands, so that the besamim is in your left hand and the wine is in your right hand. Now let me ask you a question. Besides, I watch Rav Meir is a big tzaddik, a big mekobel. He's a big yarit, medaktik and halacha mamish. When he does havdalah, he's holding them always in both hands, wine in the right and then the besam in the left, and then he swaps it. But his hands are always full. If you go to most people's havdalah, that is not what's done. What's done is the item that you're making the bracha on is the right hand, and the other one is on the table. So the truth is, the Aruch HaShulchan says that's fine. The Aruch HaShulchan says that when the Mechaber says, when you read the Mechaber, it sounds like the Mechaber is telling you have to hold in both hands, you got to just swap it. And that's the Chaya Adam says. The Aruch HaShulchan says, no, you're misreading the Mechaber. All the Mechaber means is that the item that you make the bracha on is in your right hand. I don't care what the other item is. You can put it down. That doesn't matter. That's the Aruch HaShulchan, and I think that's the common custom. Okay, the famous Shaila. So then the Mechaber says that after the besamim, you put the besamim down, and then you hold the candle in your left hand, and then you swap it, and then the same thing. But again, it depends on if you're lishitasa, you'll hold both. But pashas, most people just focus on the item that they're making the bracha on is in the right hand. Even the candle, most people don't even hold the candle. They just they look at it. Famous shaila is: are women obligated in havdalah? This is super negeya, and I think that most people they don't do this so well, and it's something just to be careful with. Here's the shayla: are women obligated in Havdala? So it's like this: is Havdala deraisa or derabanan? If Havdala is deraisa, then women are for sure obligated. Why? Havdala is a time-bound mitzvah, and time-bound mitzvahs women are exempt. So let me ask you a question: are women obligated to make kiddush? Yes, but it's time bound. What's the answer? The Gemara famously says, it says, Zachar v'shamar b'dibor echad. Zachar means Kiddush, right? Remembering Shabbos at the entrance of Shabbos. Shamar is the lamed tes malachos. B'dibor echad. It was said at once. Why? Anyone who has to keep the lamed tes malachos has to make Kiddush. And because women have to keep the lamed tes malachos, they have to hear Kiddush. So Zachar is Kiddush. Women are obligated in Zachar, for sure. If Havdala is deraisa, it's included in Zachar. That included in Zachar means that I say good Shabbos in the beginning of Shabbos to Shabbos with Kiddush, and I say goodbye to Shabbos with Havdala. If it's deraisa, women are for sure obligated like men, no shaila. Even if it's derabbanon, the Magi Mishnah writes, even if it's derabbanon, they should still be obligated. Why? Because Rabbanon usually model their things after deraisa, so if they made Havdala modeled after Kiddush, they're obligated in Kiddush. Comes the Orchos Chaim and he says, no, women are potter from Havdalah. They don't have to. Why? It's very interesting. The Indian of women being obligated in Havdalah is because they're obligated in Kiddush. Anything Shabbos related, they're the same, right? Men and women are the same for all things Shabbos. They're obligated in Lamed Tes Malachis, in Lechem Mishnah. All things Shabbos, men and women are the same. Says Orchos Chaim, Havdalah is not Shabbos. Havdalah is the first. Havdalah is the end. It's Shabbos is over. It's the beginning of the weekday. Therefore, women are exempt. So how do we paskin? This is how we paskin. Better to avoid the shaila. So what do I mean? It's very simple. A woman should not make Havdalah herself. She should hear it from a man, right? So you get home, you should make Havdalah, not your wife. Why? Because you haven't heard Havdalah yet. You're obligated for sure. She's probably obligated, but not as sure. So you should make Havdalah and be motzi her. Super simple. But here's the opposite. If you've already heard Havdalah and you've already made Havdalah, should you make Havdalah for her? So if she's obligated, for sure, I can make Kiddush 1,000 times to be motzi people. But there's a chance she's not obligated. In which case, there's a chance you're saying Havdalah for zero reason. You're repeating Havdalah for no reason. Therefore, it is best for her to say Havdalah and not for you. Now, if she's not comfortable, I wouldn't make a fight over it. But if there's a woman who's capable of reading, and she doesn't mind, she should make Havdalah and not the wife, and not the husband. If he's already been yoytz to the mitzvah, because why should he put himself in a shaila when it's unnecessary? It's easy. And that's something that, a shaila of whether she's chayiv in ner, the Bi'alacha wasn't so confident, but Ravadia, Ramosha, Rishlam Zamdi holds she is. That's what I would say. So if the husband has already made Havdalah, and he comes home, she should say her own Havdalah. It's easy. It's not, again, if she doesn't want to, that's a different story. But if she can, she should. It's a good question. So making Havdalah in shul is not done by sefardi, by Nusach Sefardi. It's done by Ashkenazi. The truth is, nobody's yaitza anymore with it. They used to make Havdalah in shul. It was an old minig to be mitzi the poor people that didn't have wine, that weren't going home. They basically were like homeless, and they were staying in shul. So they needed someone to make Havdalah for them. So they made a public Havdalah to be mitzi them. No one is in that situation anymore. So the truth is, when you make Havdalah in shul, no one's being yaitza with that. If you decide, I'm going to be yaitza, it's not a great idea, because then you go home and you're putting your wife in that awkward situation, because you're giving yourself two choices. You're going to make it for her, and that's not ideal, or you're going to make her do it for herself, and she's not going to want to do that. And therefore, most husbands should not hear Havdalah outside of the house, because why do that? It's not recommended. But conceptually, they would make Havdalah for people. But nowadays, nobody's yaitza with the Havdalah. The shul. At the end of the day, we do hold me'ikar adin, the women are obligated in Havdalah. So, at the end of the day, if you told me that, she doesn't want to make Havdalah, so make Havdalah for her, even though you've already, why not? And in the shuls, listen, if people are being yaitza, okay, great. If they're being yaitza, that's fine. Historically, most people are not yaitza with the Havdalah in the shul, and that's not me talking, that's the Shulchan Aruch Harav and the Balatani and the Magen Avram, because most times people, the ceremony is not as necessary, but if there are people that it needs for, okay, it's great, Anyway, this is just as an aside, this is something that's tricky, it's not really related to this, I have a personal issue. Okay, so Chabad's minig is that on Rosh Chodesh, the only one that says the bracha on Hallel is the Chazan. That's the minig of Chabad. I think Sephardim are the same. Not every person makes the bracha on Hallel, just the Chazan, and he's mitzi everyone. That's the minig of Chabad. Now, I normally go with Chabad when it comes to sit. Me personally, I normally go with Chabad for any davening related halachas, because I daven Nusach Hari, and therefore that you got to just pick a lane. But the issue is over here, although the Chazan is saying the bracha, not just here, any shul, the Chazan is saying the bracha on Hallel. I don't think he's thinking to be mitzi anybody. So I don't feel comfortable relying on it that like, well, he's technically a chazan and he's saying words that mean I'm being mitzi people, but his intention is not, because nobody thinks to be mitzi anybody. That's like the tricky thing, even though that's the fundamental purpose of the chazan. So it's like interesting about like Havdala. You probably have to go over to the guy and be like, hey, have me in mind, even though like what he's doing is technically to be mitzi people, but like I think the average person in many shuls is not even thinking, they're just thinking the ceremony. They're not actually thinking anyone's. But there are shuls, you good point, there are shuls where people like, I'd like to be Yotza, then you just got to tell the guy, like, hey, have me in mind, unless we say that his, I can't imagine his kavanah is, I don't know. The Baal Tanya and the Magen Avram write that nowadays there's an assumed no Yotza by the people in shul, so when you hear it, you don't have to specifically say, like, I'm not Yotza, because that's the assumption, because most people don't want to be Yotza in the shul, they want to go home and Yotza with their families. That's the Baal Tanya says. It's interesting. Okay, just to run through some halachas related to the besamim. Just a couple more halachas, then I'll mention the two shilas that I got this week. So I mentioned this on Friday night. Why do we do besamim on Matzah Shabbos? And I always get this question. There's always the same question, which is whenever it's like Matzah Yom Tif or Matzah, a Chol Hamoed, I always ask like, what's the Havdala? What's the Havdala? It's a very simple rule. Okay. The Havdala has 4 parts. It's got the Hagafen, which it'll always have. It has the Baruch HaMavdim and Kodesh L'chol, the Baruch HaMavdim Kodesh L'chol and L'choshech. That it'll always have. The 2 things that always is up in the air is Besamim and Ner. It's very simple. Why do we do them both? So let's do Ner. Why do you make a bracha on a fire on Matzah Shabbos? The reason is because the Gemara in Psachim, Daf Nun Dalid, says that the first Matzah Shabbos of creation, the first Saturday night, it started to get very, very dark because Shabbos ended, and that spiritual light was removed. And Adam Rishon started to freak out. He really thought that the world was coming to an end. He had never experienced a darkness like that. So Hashem gave him an idea. Take 2 rocks, smack them together, and he made fire. Or he rubbed sticks, it's unclear. But he made fire. And when he made fire, he says, Bayrei ma'irei ha'esh. That's what he says. So because that happened on the first Saturday night of all time, every Saturday night we say Bari Meresh. By the way, that means that you only do it on Saturday night and on Matzah Shabbos. If Yom Tif is on a Thursday and it ends on Thursday night, you're not making Bari Meresh because that's not the point. And by the way, if you forgot to make Havdala Matzah Shabbos and you're making it Sunday morning, you're also not doing Bari Meresh because it's a Saturday night ritual. The other one is Besamim. Why do we do Besamim on Matzah Shabbos in Havdala? The reason is because the Gemara says in Be'eh, I think it's Daf Tezvav, the Gemara says that Hashem gives you a neshama yisera on Shabbos, an extra soul, and then on Matzah Shabbos that soul leaves you, and you feel like, and you feel kind of tzabrachen from it. And when someone wants a little pick-me-up, like on Yom Kippur, when you're feeling a little shvach, what do? They take the little, you take a little bump of the Besamim, and you have shmek tabik, and you wake up. So we'll get to that in a second. So this besamim, so because the soul left you, a little pick-me-up, you smell the besamim and it gives you a little pick-me-up. So by the way, you only do that on Matzah Shabbos where the Neshama Yisera leaves you. On Yom Tif, where you don't have a Neshama Yisera, you don't say it. And if you're doing it on Sunday, you're also not doing it. So you made a good point. There's only one other time that you do the Ner, and that's Matzah Yom Kippur. And that's a different reason. That's to be mavdil between Yom Kippur and other Yomim Tovim. Every other Yom Tif, you're allowed to raise the intensity of the fire. You could play with fire when it comes to cooking. Yom Kippur is a Yom Tif, but you're not allowed to touch fire. So therefore, we want to show Hamavdil, like Hamavdim in Kodesh L'chol, we want to show the fire itself is a Havdal. That's a separate reason. That's the very reason why in Yom Kippur, because the reason is not just to thank God for making fire, it's to show that I could not use this fire throughout the Yom Kippur. Therefore, it's not. You don't take a match and strike it Matzah Yom Kippur. You have to take a fire that was lit for 24 hours because you're showing this very fire I could not use for 24 hours. That's Gufa part of the reason. So anyway, quick couple shilas when it comes to besamim. I'll mention 3 halachas. 3 halachas when it comes to besamim. Maybe 4. One is, what bracha? I mentioned this Friday night. What bracha do you make in the besamim? So there's a big misconception that people always just make bari mineh besamim. On Matzah Shabbos, that's correct. But what people don't realize, that's not the proper bracha, basically on anything. There are different brachas that you make on besamim throughout the week. There's borei atzei, which is on a fragrant tree. Borei isvei on a fragrant grass. And hanos and reach tov beperis, which is on good fruit. Borei mine is none of this. What's borei mine b'samim? Borei mine b'samim is not the optical bracha on anything. It's the bracha on things that we don't know what category to put it in. Meaning, I'll give you an example. There's two things that you actually make a borei mine b'samim on throughout the week. And that is animal musk. I don't know why you're smelling animal musk, but if you are, and it smells good to you, animal musk is not atzei, isvei, or noser rechatev bears. So, by default, it's mine. The other one is cloves. According to the Chayei Adam, cloves is borei mine. Why? Because what category you put cloves in? So you'll say, well, it's a hard stem. It's hard. Atzei. Yeah, but it's food. Hanoser rechatev bears. Yeah, but you don't eat it. It's a spice that is put in food. So it's not noser rechatev bears, which is like a lemon. So because we're not sure what to do, mine. So matzah Shabbos, what bracha do you make? Says the Mishnah Berurah, all Ashkenazim make all spices on matzah Shabbos is borei mine b'samim. Why? Because we don't want to confuse people. It's so hard on a matzah Shabbos if you take this. Okay, I took jasmine, I took rosemary. You're going to start calling shilas. What's this? What's that? Make it easy. Just make borei mine b'samim, which is the cover-all. Everyone makes a borei mine b'samim on everything. That's the Ashkenazi minhag. By the way, it says in Mishnah Berurah, because of this, it's better to use cloves, or at least put cloves in there. Why? Because cloves is the only actually borei mine. Okay. That's why it's a minhag. Klal Yisrael, they always use cloves. There's a reason why Klal Yisrael gave out cloves for hundreds of years. Sefardim don't hold this way. Sefardim, their minhag is, they hold, you make separate brachas for the different spices. So they don't make borei mine. If they take rosemary, it's borei isvei. If they take chveis, other things, it's borei atzah. They make the proper bracha. That's the minhag of Sefardim. A couple more halachas. Could you use perfume or cologne? It's interesting shayla. Could you use now deodorant? You cannot, and air fresheners you cannot, because the Mechaber says you only make a bracha on things that you're smelling because it gives off a good smell, not things that are meant to mask bad odors. So deodorant's out, air freshener's out, but a cologne, a good smelling cologne, perfume. Can I do that? So I think all of us would be very uncomfortable by doing this. The truth is, Rosh Hashanah Zalman says no. Why? Because he says you only make a bracha on natural things, not chemicals and not things that are produced in labs. It's not. Rav Heinemann, by the way, I just saw Rav Heinemann has an interesting sheet. He agrees. You don't make a bracha because it's interesting. He says borei mine b'samim means that it was created by God. It's not created by God. It's created by man. It's not included in the bracha. Just maybe it was a chiddush. Anyway, Rav Vad Yosef and Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg disagree. Rav Vad Yosef says, why can't I make it on perfume and cologne? Why not? Scheinberg felt the same way. And apparently there were times where Rav Vadia would take cologne and use that for b'samim on matzah Shabbos. Interesting. I don't know what I would do. Safek brachas I probably wouldn't, but Rav Vadia and Rav Scheinberg they're big guns. Anyway, one last shayla, and then I'll mention two shaylas that I had during the week. One last shayla is, sometimes you have it. I think this happens all the time. You take the b'samim, it's an older b'samim, and you make the bracha, and this happens all the time. The person will make the bracha, and then he'll give a look like nothing. That's a bracha of Havdala, right? If you make a bracha and it doesn't give off any smell, it's not. So you know what the Ben Ish Chai says to do, and Moshe Fancy would do? They would smell it first without a bracha, just to make sure. Even though normally you think to yourself, how could you smell without a bracha? Because if I'm doing this to make sure that the bracha will be chal, so what they would do is they would smell it first, make sure it has an aroma, and then say Baruch Bar Min B'Samim. And if it didn't have an aroma, they would find something else. But that's something probably people should do, as opposed to just making the bracha and then looking at each other like, I got nothing. It's not a good answer. I mentioned two shilas that I got. As I'll tell you, my initial gut reaction was no, and then I found afterwards I still stand by no. Someone called me up and he said, "Can a guy wax his legs?" So my initial gut reaction, I'm not comfortable with that at all. But the truth is, it's interesting shayla, because when you look in the Shulchan Aruch talks about removing body hair. The Shulchan Aruch says the two main parts of the body that are a problem are the armpits and the genital area, because those are the areas that women remove for sure, and therefore for a man to remove it is loy silbash. It's following in the ways of women. The rest of the body, the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to use scissors on, meaning you can't use a blade, but if a man wants to cut his chest with the scissor, he's allowed to do this. So you look at that. So you can't use a blade, but you can use scissors on your whole body outside of the armpit and the base erva. So you say to yourself, so why can't, if I'm allowed to use a scissor on my chest, so why can't I wax my chest? Wax is not a blade. Blade is also, it's not a blade. So there are poskim who are mekel, but I have a sefer called Beis Hayra. It's from the yeshiva of Rav Yaakov Hillel, and they write the following. And I saw Rabbi Olbaum Taka quotes this in his sefer. Kol davar ha'oises ha'or cholak ketar nesar. Anything that makes the body smooth is like a blade. It's not allowed. So it should not be done. And I got to tell you, it should not be done. We are not going in the right direction for a man to wax his body, but it potentially is a problem also. And one last shaila, I just got this. I think I got this last year also, but I don't remember if I ever spoke about this. I definitely got it because I looked into it. Person just called me, said that they are having surgery in their mouth, teeth, whatever, and they already know that by Pesach they're going to have major issues with their mouth. They're going through a process. It's going to be a very long process, and eating matzah, there's a legitimate concern that he or she will not be able to eat matzah on Pesach. So the question is, can they, as Ashkenazim, eat the sefardi matzah, which is soft? It's an interesting shayla. So Rav Asher Weiss has a tshuva about this. Rav Asher Weiss goes through where he discusses, well, what's the main issue with us eating sefardi matzah? It's like a lafa-ish type thing. So Rav Asher Weiss said, there was an old minig among Ashkenazim that we make matzah very thin and we don't make it very thick. But at first he says, he always thought that the fact that we make it super thin, not charedi thin, but like super shatzer matzah thin, all these things. It's dated myself. But that thin, he felt was like maybe it wasn't even part of the minig. It was just, we mass produce it for so many months out. If it's at all thicker, it'll spoil. But he does quote the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer brings down that the minig amongst Ashkenazim is to have as thin as possible and to not have thicker matzahs. And therefore, Rav Asher Weiss says that a person, Ashkenazim, should avoid eating sefardi matzah to the best of their abilities. However, and this is what I told this person. What I told this person was like this, and this is based on Rav Asher Weiss. I told this person like this. If you could eat matzah, get it down, the shiur, I would do that. I would not eat the sefardi matzah. If I could eat the shiur of Ashkenazi matzah, I would. Secondly, even as someone who doesn't eat gebruks, I don't eat matzah that gets wet. If you could take matzah and dip it in water or get it wet, and that you'll be able to get it down, I would do that before I eat sefardi matzah. But if both of those are not an option, and the person is a chayla, and the option is not eating matzah, I would definitely eat sefardi matzah. As long as it's done with a good kashrus and within 18 minutes, it's not chametz. There's a minig that Ashkenazim don't eat such thick matzah, but that minig should not prevent someone from being kind the mitzvah deraisa. And therefore, I told the person I stress to them, they should stress their ability to eat matzah, Ashkenazi matzah if they can. But if they cannot, I would think sefardi matzah is fine. You're asking about in the beginning of the shiur about the Havdala putting on the eyes. That's what the Ramah says. He does not mention putting the wine anywhere else. But I used to make fun of the people that put it in the pockets. And I've learned in my old age that the thing you make fun of and then you find the video, Rav Meyer does it every week. I could tell you, I've seen it every single week. I have the videos. Rav Meyer is a big tzaddik and he's a big medaktik in halacha. He every single week puts the wine on his eyes and then he puts it in his pockets every single week. And if someone of that caliber does it, then it's definitely not made up. I don't do it personally, but it's definitely, it's no longer made up for sure now. No, so I'll tell you just one quick thing about the hadassim. Sefardim use hadassim. I told you that the Mechaber mentions about using the hadassim of the Daled Minim. But they bring down from the Arizal that the Arizal implies that there's an Indian to use a hadas as besamim, even if it's not from the Daled Minim. Just alpi Kabbalah, whatever that means, is Indian to use hadassim. And many Sefardim still use hadassim today. And you said you're right. By the Kotel, there's usually hadassim and rosemary. Those are the two things that you'll find at the Kotel for sure. So the truth is, the hadassim, even the Mechaber, when he was talking about using hadassim, it was dried out, but it wasn't so dried. It still gave off some aroma. But nowadays it doesn't give off anything. I mean, then what they have ended up doing is the Ramah says you should take the hadassim and put it in the besamim. So let's say you have a besamim thing, mix it in. So at least you still have the hadas. But yeah, it still has to give off some aroma. If it gives off no aroma, then obviously you can't use that. So you're asking a very good question. If someone has a cold and they can't smell at all, they should not be saying the bracha. It'll be a bracha of Havdala. Even to say it for others is a big shaila. The other people should say it, not them. If it's a suffix, that's what the Ben Ish Chai would do, is he would take the besamim and smell it first to see, meaning he would test it before he makes the bracha. And if he cannot smell, then I would not make the bracha on it. No, I would have someone else make the bracha for sure, because it would be a bracha of Havdala. That's exactly the point. You should test it before. The same way you could test the besamim to see if it gives off a fragrance, you can also test your nose. You know what I mean?